You are listening to the Keep the Weight Off podcast with Dr. Angela, episode number 65.
Welcome to the Keep the Weight Off podcast, where we bust all the dieting myths and discover not just how to lose weight, but more importantly, how to keep it off. We go way beyond the food, and we use science and psychology to give you strategies that work. And now your host, Dr. Angela Zechmann.
Hey everyone, for this week's podcast, I have something very, very special. It's a recording of an interview that I did for the Keep the Weight Off Summit back in December of 2020. This particular interview was with Florence Christophers, and her topic was, is it sugar addiction or emotional eating? Frankly, at the time, I did not realize there was much of a difference. And wow, did Florence ever enlighten me and everyone who was listening on the summit. So let me tell you a little bit about Florence before we go to the recording, because she's an amazing friend and colleague. For many years, Florence was crippled with blinding migraines, stage 4 rosacea, depression, and other health disasters, including cancer. Eventually, Florence finally made the connection between her runaway consumption of refined carbohydrates and her health challenges, and her self-abandonment and compulsive overeating. Despite desperately wanting to kick sugar and make peace with food and heal her body, she struggled for decades to break up with junk food and find new and better ways of bringing comfort and pleasure into her life. Florence says that she's sad to say that it took her 26 years to reach these goals, but she did it. She considers herself a recovered sugar addict and is now on a mission to help others get free, stay free, and rock out their happy whole food lives sooner and easier than she did. Florence has a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy and is a certified health coach with expertise in sugar addiction and emotional eating recovery, which, by the way, are very different and require unique recovery strategies, which she's going to talk about in this recording. Florence is the host of the world's first online Kick Sugar Summit. She offers group and private coaching, online courses, and live events, and she's generously offering a 30-minute coaching session to anyone listening to this podcast who would like to learn more. We'll put the link to her calendar in the show notes, which you can find at JourneyBeyondWeightLoss.com. Just click on the podcast link and go to episode number 65. So without further ado, here is Florence Christophers. Enjoy. So we mentioned as I was introducing you that there's a difference between sugar addiction and emotional eating, right?
Yes.
And so I think I might do a little bit of both at times. How do I know what is the difference between sugar addiction and emotional eating?
Great. Okay, really good. Yeah, there's a very important distinction, and it's important to know what you are, because if you're using strategies to end your addiction, that are better suited to emotional eating and vice versa, it can just prolong the journey to recovery. So this is the quiz I have for people to try and determine if they're a sugar addict. Now, most people on the planet really hope that they're not sugar addicts, because everybody knows that if you're addicted to something, your path to freedom involves abstinence. Mm-hmm. So it's a really important quiz. Yeah. But the truth is that there's a relatively small percentage of people that are truly addicted. And here is the criteria to judge that. It's taken from the DSM-4.
Okay.
Which is what's it called? The APA, Diagnostic Statistics Manual, blah, blah, blah.
Statistical Manual, yeah.
Okay, great. And they used to call it, this quiz used to determine if you're an addict, but they decided that the word addict was kind of loaded and people didn't love it. So they've now called addiction substance dependence. And here's the criteria according to the DSM. Mm-hmm. So I've made this quite specific to the consumption of refined carbohydrates, otherwise known as sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that you need increased amounts of your favorite sugary drinks and foods to achieve the desired effect? So if you notice that the size of your pop is increased, or you've gone from a normal size chocolate bar to the king size, do you eat more than you used to? Maybe it used to be like once a day, and now you find that you're dipping into the cookie jar more than once. So that's known as tolerance.
Okay.
Do you experience withdrawal symptoms?
Okay.
That's known as withdrawal. Do you binge eat? Loss of control?
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
What kind of withdrawal symptoms would somebody who was a sugar addict typically experience? Like, they're not going to necessarily have the shakes that you would have when you were withdrawing from, like, if you were an alcoholic. Like, they're not going to go into delirium tremens or something like that. So what kind of withdrawal?
Yeah, you can, absolutely. So
you can. Okay.
That's actually a really common withdrawal symptom for people who have really unstable blood sugars. Even skipping a meal can do that. Your hands can shake. You can feel nauseous. You can get a headache. You can have strong cravings. You can feel tired. You can feel really irritable. You can be moody too, like just you can get depressed. The withdrawal symptoms, depending on how intense your use is and how long you've been using and how extensively, how much of your food that you eat during the day comprises of processed foods. Yeah, it can be very intense. There are clinics, certainly around the world, where people can go into detox, to go through the detox process. Most of us will notice that we're just a bit shaky. We'll have headaches and we'll be irritable.
Okay.
Great question. Do you binge on sweet foods? Okay, yeah, we covered that one. Loss of control. Mm-hmm. Do you experience a loss of control over the quantity? So let's say you're like, oh, I'll just have one piece of pie, 3/4 of a pumpkin pie later. You're like, oh, oops. Do you eat or drink sweet foods or drinks more often than you'd like? Do you find that you crave or have a persistent desire for refined carbohydrates? That's known as persistent desire. And they're unrelenting. For those of us that are addicts, it's unrelenting. If you're not addicted, it's like this slight sort of craving or urge for something sweet. Mm-hmm. But when you're an addict, it's unrelenting. It just keeps hammering you. No, seriously, I want some of those cookies over there. And you go, oh, no, I'm not eating those cookies. Thank you very much. No. And then it just keeps coming back. I call that part of us that's addicted to sugar, the sugar dragon. And the dragon will just keep poking and badgering and pestering, and it's unrelenting. Whereas most people who are not addicted will be able to say, no, I'm not eating a cookie right now. And they don't really have the dragon inside, but whatever that sort of little pleasure drive that got activated will more or less just kind of fall away, but it just doesn't fall away in an addict. In fact, sometimes it just gets stronger and more urgent.
Okay.
Have you experienced successful efforts to cut back or quit the consumption? So if you tried to eliminate or cut back on your consumption of refined carbohydrates, that's known as unsuccessful efforts. So for many people who are not addicted, if they have a really good reason to break up with sugar or to cut back or eliminate it, and maybe a bit of support, some new recipes, give it a little bit of time, within 2 or 3 weeks, they'll have made significant progress if they really truly want it, right? If they have a really good reason. It just isn't true for addicts. They'll have a couple good days and then they'll relapse. They'll have a couple good weeks and then they'll relapse. Like, there's just a stunning failure to do what you truly want to do. And for many of us that are addicted to sugar, we'll be like, I'm a really headstrong person. When I put my head to stuff, I'll just do it. I've been wildly successful in all kinds of areas of my life. Why is this sugar thing so hard? And that can be one of those cues. Oh, there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Okay.
Another criteria is, have you noticed that you've spent significant amounts of time, energy, or money in securing your favorite junk foods? It's called time spent on securing. Okay. So for sugar addicts, this looks like, let's say it's like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and you've got like this this urge for something sugary to eat. And you're not keeping it in the house. It's not really in the cupboard. You've opened all the cupboard doors. You've looked in the fridge and there's nothing really there. And so you're like, I'll just go put my winter boots on. Well, I'm Canadian. You go put your winter boots on. You wipe the snow off the car. You drive out of the driveway and you're on icy, and you go down to the local junk food store, 7-Eleven or the grocery store. And you're going up and down the aisles and the sugar dragon's going, no. That right there. Yeah, that one, 2 of those, please. Right. And you're just being dictated by the dragon. I mean, that's a huge hassle factor. Yeah. People who are not addicted don't do that.
I had a patient tell me that she's one of these people that she will not go outside her house without full makeup, hair, very perfectly dressed. And she woke up one morning at 3:00 in the morning and she left her house in her pajamas and went to the convenience store to get something. That sounds exactly like what you're talking about. She said, I couldn't believe I did it, but it was just so strong.
That's it, Angela. I love that woman. I love that story. That's it. Mm-hmm. And those people who aren't addicted, they're like, what is wrong with you? I know. I've been asking myself that for years. What is wrong with me? This is insane behavior. Yeah. Okay. So this, I don't know. I should probably number these. Number 7 here, maybe. It's called recovering from use. Do you spend more time than you'd like recovering from the consequences of your consumption of refined carbohydrates? So for me, when I ate junk food, I would get migraines, or I'd get depressed, or I'd be tired or something. And if it was a migraine and lasted 2 or 3 days, did I spend more time than I'd like recovering from that chocolate bar I ate? Oh, hell yeah. When I was in university, sometimes on a Friday night, if we went out and partied, maybe we drank, we had pizza. That was it. That was enough to send me down, for 2 or 3 days, the Saturday, the Sunday, maybe the Monday. Well, everyone else just kept having fun and partying and going to classes on Monday morning. Okay. I was like in the dark wanting to die, right? Did I spend more time recovering from my consequences of refined carbohydrates that everyone else around me could eat in moderation? Uh-huh. Oh, hell yeah.
Okay.
Number 8, I think, is has your social, occupational, or recreational activities been reduced or canceled because of your consumption of refined carbohydrates? In other words, have you ever skipped a party to stay home in your pajamas to eat, polish off, a liter or half a liter of double chocolate fudge ice cream? We've all done it, right? Mm-hmm. And my earliest memories of doing that was actually in childhood, where my family would go next door to our neighbors to play a game called Ramoli. And I would sometimes say, I'm not feeling very well, Mom. I'm just going to stay home. And as soon as the family left, I'd drag the chair over and I'd pull down the bag of brown sugar that was on the very top of the shelf. It's just where my mom put it. She didn't hide it from us. There was never any restriction in anything. The cupboards were full of junk food. The fridge was full of junk food. The freezer was full of ice cream, popsicles, you name it. It just happened to be where she stored it. And I would drag it down and I'd eat it by the spoonful. I wouldn't eat the white stuff, but I'd eat the brown stuff. And I definitely pulled away from people to spend time with me and whatever my favorite little junk food was. Mm-hmm. And the final category is, do you continue to eat or drink processed refined carbohydrates despite knowledge of persistent physical or psychological problems that are likely to have been caused or exacerbated by the consumption of junk food? Mm-hmm. So this is the piece that anyone who's addicted to sugar, this is the piece that most bugs us, is that I know if I eat that, if I have a little, I'm going to want a lot. If I eat a chocolate bar, for me, it was trigger migraines. So it's so, so frustrating. So those are the classic hallmarks. Now, here's the kicker, is most addicts, when I run my client through this quiz, they'll say, yeah, I say yes to a few of those. I'm like, cool. Okay, here's what the DSM says. If you said yes to any of those, to 3 or more of those, anytime within a 12-month period, you qualify as an addict. You qualify as substance dependent. And they're like, what? I'm like, oh yeah. So if you said, yeah, I know I use it despite adverse consequences. Sometimes I lose control and there's unrelenting cravings. Absolutely. Now they can only be any time in the last year, even, right? They don't have to be at the same time or in the same month you qualify. So it's like a really interesting quiz because, and this is why for all addicts, abstinence is our gift. It's the joy of the answered prayer. It's what delivers our freedom because only abstinence allows us to say no to all of these consistently. No, there's no tolerance. I don't eat it. No withdrawal symptoms. I've balanced my blood sugars and rebalanced my brain chemistry. No withdrawal symptoms because I'm not eating it. No, there's no loss of control. There's no persistent desire as soon as I get it out of my bloodstream. And I'll tell you, there's a couple of things you need to do to be able to get sugar-free and stay sugar-free for life. But no, there's no desire for it. There's no unsuccessful efforts. I'm finally successful. I just don't eat it. There's no time spent securing it, no recovering from use. I never skip time with people to go and spend time with food anymore, in particular sugar. Emotional eaters can still do that, but it wouldn't be sugar, refined carbohydrates. And there's no adverse consequences anymore of the consumption. So that's why for those of us who are addicts, abstinence is like, bring it on, Florence. Teach me how to do this. I just want to be able to break up and stay broken up. No little rendezvous, no little, it's just a bite, So
This is huge because so many of us are told, just have a little bit in moderation. Like it'll be okay. Just have a couple of bites of that cake. Well, you put cake in front of me and I have every intention of having a couple of bites. I'm going to eat the whole piece and I'm going to be licking the frosting off of other people's cake. And I have actually gone, like after the party, if somebody just ate a little bit off their cake and then they threw it in the trash, I would go into the trash and get extra cake out. It is just like, it's so like these behaviors that happen are just, they're so unreasonable, and I watch myself do this going, what the heck is wrong with you? What is it about cake? So.
Yes, totally. So there's two things. So the thing is the beautiful, beautiful thing about being an addict, and this is something I've embraced with all my heart. I am deeply, deeply grateful that I fall into that category because abstinence is the joy of the answered prayer. It's what I want. If someone could give me, if I had a fairy godmother with a magic wand that can make it possible for me to moderate, it isn't what I want. I do not miss it. I don't need cake. I'm quite happy to be a whole food woman. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the definition of sugar. This addiction is very unique because unlike alcohol or cigarettes, it's really, really clear. What is a cigarette and what's alcohol? And it's incredibly clear to both alcoholics and heroin addicts and cigarette smokers and whatever else. You don't need those to live. They're not nutritious. They're right. In fact, with the cigarette smoker, maybe 2 or 3 years after they've quit smoking, they'll go, man, those stink. Like, I can't believe I was ever addicted to those. But that isn't what sugar addicts say. Because our addiction is beautiful. Those gorgeous cakes of colors, and Black Forest cake is like incredible. I would eat Black Forest cake, breakfast, lunch, and dinner if there weren't these unbearable consequences. So it is a trickier addiction because how you define sugar is very broad, and everyone defines it slightly different. So there's 4 different categories of what is sugar. There's the 56 names of sugar. Those are things like coconut sugar, brown sugar, raw sugar, dextrose, maltodextrin. If you just Google 56 names of sugar.
High fructose corn syrup.
Thank you. Agave.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Honey.
No, not honey.
Not honey.
Yeah, yes, it is, but I actually stick that in a slightly different category, and I'll tell you why. So the 56 names of sugar are typically sugars that have been processed. They come through factories. They've been concentrated. They don't exist in nature, in natural form, right? And then the second category is artificial sweeteners. Now, for some people, they're like, those aren't sugar. Yes, sweetheart, they are. For lots of reasons. One, there's very clear early evidence that they do spike insulin. Because anything sweet on the tongue, the body anticipates that a carbohydrate's coming and it starts to secrete insulin to balance it out. It definitely messes with the microbiome. It definitely can lead to cravings. So for all intents and purposes, it's factory chemical junk for sure. Yeah. But it also acts like, it can also stimulate a sugar-like response in the body. I definitely included as sugar. Now, in that category of artificial sweeteners, there are sweeteners that some people, including sugar addicts, will make exceptions. Monk fruit, erythritol, xylitol, stevia. Some people will make exceptions for those. Mainly because they've tested them. It doesn't trigger the desire to overeat. They use it so very rarely, once in a blue moon. They don't think about it. It's just it just creates a little bit of versatility in their world. But the minute they are eating something with either of those sweeteners in it, and they feel that pull, they know exactly what it feels like when you're like, oh, that tastes really good. And you intend to have one, and you do have one the first day. And then the next day it's two. And then a week later, you're baking with it. And you're like, oh, no, dragon. You're trying to drag this in the back door. I'm on to you. Yeah. Not a chance. That's going on the red list. So I put foods onto red, green, and yellow list. Red is that I just don't eat it. I know what it does in my body. Negative consequence, or it stimulates or it activates the addictive pathway. So that's the red list. Then there's the yellow list. I really am not sure if it triggers cravings. I'm not sure if there's adverse consequences in my body. So I'm going to create a food rule around it. So for example, I can use stevia in such and such circumstance, or to make a cake, but I only eat it on birthdays or something, special occasion, something like that. And if you can't hold to your rule, that's where I say to the dragon, look it. I've been a very reasonable woman here. I have left stevia or maple syrup or xylitol or something in our monk fruit in our meal plan, just for a little flexibility here. And if you give me any more hassle about this, that's going on the red list, right? So you step into your badass mama backbone energy. And often the dragon will go, okay, got it, right? Or it'll just keep unrelenting. And if it's unrelenting, it's activating the addictive response. It is not personal. It's a biochemical body thing. Yeah. I can say more about that. And then there's the green list. If I'm hungry, I can eat it. Okay. So it's really, really important to know your own truth, to know your own body. What belongs on the yellow list? What belongs on the red list? And I love that I can trust my sugar clients, addicted clients, because if you can be honest enough with yourself that you need to give up sugar, because who in their right mind would give up sugar without a really, really, really good reason? If it truly wasn't your truth, nobody. Like, that's crazy, right? It's such a wonderful, wonderful pleasure. And it's so versatile and so convenient and so social. So if you can be honest that you need to give up sugar, you can be honest about stevia and xylitol and any of the other sort of artificial sweeteners. So that's the second category. And that's where you just kind of need to do a little bit of like your own soul searching. Personally, if you asked me, if you have a health condition of any kind, if you have weight to lose, you got no business dabbling with any of them. Get to your goal weight, reverse your lifestyle diseases. Then you can decide which ones you want to bring back in and dabble with and see how they work with you. If you have a health condition of any kind or you're overweight, you need to be a whole food woman. Start there. Because there's no medical intervention. There's no superfood. There's no supplement. There's no prayer. There's no pharmaceutical intervention. There's nothing that can undo the damage that sugar does once your body's compromised. Third category is flours. So as we know, all sugars are all saccharides are sugars. So saccharides and sugars are synonymous. So we have monosaccharides, we have disaccharides, and we have polysaccharides. A monosaccharide is where it's a single molecule of sugar. it would be like fructose. And a disaccharide is where there's two molecules of sugar that are bound together. So that's like white refined sugar, which is 50% fructose and 50% glucose, and they're bound together. That's called a disaccharide. And then there's polysaccharides. Now, polysaccharides are strings of sugar, sugar molecules strung together. All cereal grains are polysaccharides. They are literally 12 to 15 molecules of glucose, pure glucose, strung together. Now, in their whole form, it takes a fair bit for the body to break that all down into glucose, so it's considered a slow carb. But the minute us clever little human beings turn them into powders, it just becomes pure sugar. It is pure. It's pure glucose. So on the glycemic index, the 100 mark, which is, it used to be the top of the glycemic index. There's now slightly above that, but it used to be 100. It was glucose. White refined sugar is lower on the glycemic index than a piece of toast, even whole grain toast, because those sugars are released so quickly into the body. Because they're turned into flour, they're released so quickly into the body and create such an insulin spike.
Can you say that again? Did you just say that white refined sugar is lower on the glycemic index than a piece of toast?
Yes.
No wonder my patients struggle so much with bread.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And right.
Wow.
And so there's this fabulous little graphic. I wish I maybe could find it quickly on my computer. It's so great. So the question is, can you guess which is which? And you've got three little piles of white powder. One of them is icing sugar. One of them is white refined flour. And one of them is cocaine. And you cannot tell the difference. You really can't. You would have to get up real close, smell it, taste it. They're all drugs.
Yeah.
They've all been refined. So white refined sugar has gone through the exact same refinement process as heroin. In fact, the white refined sugar that we have today could not have existed prior to the late 1900s when we invented the centrifugal turbine. So as we know, heroin, do you know where heroin comes from in nature?
Heroin, doesn't it come from poppy?
It does.
Yeah.
So if you take the poppy seed and you refine it, you get opium. And then if you take opium and you refine it even more, make it more concentrated, you get morphine. And if you take morphine and you refine it to as much as we can humanly refine it, you get heroin.
Wow.
That is the same process white refined sugar goes through from the cane or the beet or the cane, stalk of cane, which if you just ate, it's almost impossible to get sick off of it because it's a whole food. But if you take a stalk of cane and refine it, you get white refined sugar. It's a little drop of acid that has its own chemical formula. It's that pure. And it is a pure drug, absolutely unequivocally. It doesn't mean that everybody gets quite as hooked as others. We kind of fall into a bell curve. The best research we have is 8 to 15% of the population are truly biochemically, physiologically addicted to sugar. And why? It's because we can show that it acts like an opiate in the body.
Yeah.
It lights up our brain chemistry. So I'm gonna grab some water.
Yeah. This is just really so interesting to hear just how addictive this stuff really is. Oh.
Yeah, it truly is. But again, everyone's kind of in a bit of a bell curve. So 18 to 15% of the population is our best estimate are truly addicted to sugar, which means it acts like an opiate, which means that it very quickly and very intensely impacts our brain chemistry, our neurotransmitters. It just isn't true for everybody. We can all ingest the same cookie, but there could be a very slow rise in terms of the neurotransmitter response for person A, and there can be this incredibly intense, pleasurable shift in brain chemistry for person B. Person B has the preconditions for the possibility of becoming addicted. If the response is slow and it's not intense, that is just not something you're going to become addicted to. And you are or you're not. You do or you don't have that kind of chemistry. It's not personal. It just is what it is. It's just example, like some people can respond very powerful, quickly and intensely to alcohol, quickly and intensely to cigarettes, quickly and intensely to any kind, all kinds of other substances and behaviors. So that said, back to the third category. Interestingly, all the saccharides, so all saccharides are sugars, the mono, the di, and the polysaccharides are sugars. But there's only one kind of sugar that's really, really sweet on the tongue. That sugar is fructose. Yeah. So if any of these sources of sugar is cut with a molecule of fructose, it will taste sweet on your tongue. So many of us just think of sugar as being, oh, if it's really sweet, it's sugar. But if it's not really sweet, then it's not sugar. No, it's still sugar. It just hasn't been cut with fructose. So grains that are turned into powders are pure sugar. They're pure molecules of glucose that have been made incredibly bioavailable to the body by turning it into a powder. But people are like, no, bread's not sugar. No, bread is sugar. It's just not sweet because there's very little to no presence of fructose in there. Yeah. So that helps. So that's the third category of sugar.
Okay.
The fourth category, I put honey in there because technically it's a whole food. It exists in nature as long as it's the raw, unrefined honey, because honey can be incredibly refined and it becomes kind of like a slight brown liquid. And that is just, again, we've tinkered with it and we turn it into sort of like this equivalent of high fructose corn syrup. Not quite that bad, let me be clear, but on that path. Yeah. So for some sugar addicts, they can do a bit of stevia and they can do a bit of honey every now and then, and maybe they can't. And only they will know. That is up to you to decide. That's your truth to discover. And some sugar addicts can actually do a very dark maple syrup if it's only been boiled to concentrate, not tinkered with in a factory or a lab or something like that. Okay. Some people can, some people can't. But let me be clear, it's still sugar. It will still spike insulin. It can still block weight loss because, of course, high insulin turns off the fat burning switch because it's like, I got a lot of sugar to burn here. Don't burn fat, body, because I got to get rid of this sugar. Burn that first, right? So we just need to be really strategic. Only sugar addicts really care. If we can, right? Most people aren't addicted to sugar. Go, oh, who cares? Whatever. If it's in the way of my weight loss, or if it's in the way of my mental resiliency, or, I don't know, there's so many different ways that lives are improved by giving up sugar. Yeah, kidding. That if they're not addicted, they're like, okay. It's just like if someone told me I could never eat broccoli again, I'd be like, okay. Right. Sucks, but okay, whatever. If there's a good reason, I'll do it. Yeah. So here's the two things you need. And I do definitely would love to spend some time with the emotional eating piece, because emotional eaters can overeat sugar. Mm-hmm. But there's three categories of sugar consumers. There's the sugar users. Mm-hmm. Most of us are sugar users because it's in everything. It's in 80% of our processed foods. Yeah. So most people are using sugar. They're sugar users. Mm-hmm. And then there's sugar abusers. These are individuals that are eating way too much. Mm-hmm. And if they had a really good reason and they had some support and some better recipes, they would very relatively easily eliminate or reduce their consumption. Mm-hmm. And then there's the sugar addicts. Okay. Right. And that's just the tip of the bell curve. Now, Dr. Vera Tarman will say, Florence, there's no way it's only 8 to 15% of the population's addicted to sugar. It's way more than that. I'm like, well, science doesn't show it. She goes, I know, you just watch. And she argues that because we get exposed to it so young, sometimes you hear stories of kids having sweetened milk or Mountain Dew in their bottle. Tragic, but true. Yes. Terribly. I just want to go and wrap my arms around those babies and support the mothers. So very young, the sugar goes in and destabilizes their brain chemistry. And I can tell you the science around that. So she thinks that what's happening is it's destabilizing our brains quicker, and it's predisposing us to become way more of us to be hooked into sugar than the average addict. When we do studies with rodents, they'll have them in a cage, they'll give them water, and it's done through this little tube, and they just have to lick it and they get some water. And then what they do is they take out the water. It's all cruel. It's wrong. I can't believe the things we do with animals. But anyways, then they will put in a little tube where there's cocaine or sugar in there. And that's all they get to drink. If they're thirsty, they have to drink the water that has been cut with the drug. And they get them drug addicted. Mm-hmm. And then what they do is they bring the tube with just the water back in, and they give them the option of whether they will continue to drink the water with the drug in it, mm-hmm. or just return to the water. Roughly 8 to 15% of those rodents will go back, will die of just drinking the water cut with the drug. And most of them will go back to just drinking water and have nothing to do with that other water spout.
Interesting.
Now they're related. They were raised the same. It's not childhood trauma. It's not, right? Like it's a biochemical body wiring process. Now, the guy who taught me the technique that set me free, which works really, really quickly and very beautifully, and perhaps there'll be time to share that.
Yeah.
His name is Jack. He had this epiphany that addicts are the lucky ones for so many reasons. A, we get to just say no thanks to sugar and never have to wonder if we're overdoing it. It's like, I just don't need it, which is a relief. And the other thing he says, we can be pleasured. We are often easily delighted with life. We just need to get plugged into and hooked into things that are pro-life, that light us up and bring us joy and delight and pleasure, that aren't, wrecking our bodies and our minds at the same time. But that's possible for us. He goes, there are people that come into the world flat. Nothing lights them up. Nothing gets them jack. A sunset isn't the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. They're like, it's a sunset. They're Eeyores. And it goes, never true of addicts. And it goes, the other thing about addicts is that they have very strong nervous systems. You have to be able to handle getting high. And sugar makes us high. Oh. Especially if we turn them into speedballs. Now, speedballs is where you combine 4 ingredients together. Caffeine, so chocolate. And then you've got your flour. So you've got, and especially if it's made from wheat, because you've got your gluteomorphine in there, which is just like a morphine, like another opiate in the body. So you put chocolate with flour, and then you add the fat, the dairy fat. So you got the fat plus the casomorphine, which acts like a bit of a morphine for some of us. If you're sensitive to it, it's another drug.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you cut it with some sugar. Yeah. It's a speedball, right? It's the perfect food. I would eat Black Forest cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if it wouldn't kill me, and damn near did.
Wow. So I never thought of cake as a speedball.
Right?
Oh,
yeah, that's a drug term for those of you that don't know what.
Maybe that's why my brain is so hooked on cake. It's like, there are other types of sugar my brain doesn't do that to, but cake it does.
Right. You've got the gluteomorphine and you've got the sugar. Well, you've got the 2 there. And if you can add some dairy, some buttercream, then you've got some of the fat and the casomorphine. Now, if you just added a little chocolate, you'd have yourself a speedball. Now, speedball is where you cut, I think I've got this right. It's heroin and cocaine together. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's like where you put the upper and the downers together. I don't have that kind of body. I could never. My nervous system can handle sugar. I can handle getting high, absolutely, on sugar, and I can. But I can't. I don't think I could. I think I would die with one speedball personally. That I don't have. I don't have a strong enough system for that. So if you are listening to this and you're like, oh dang, I think I might be a sugar addict. No problem, sister or brother, because we have all the right brain chemistry and nervous system to be able to go and have an absolutely fantastic life, to feel as good, if not better, on something that isn't, self-destructive to our bodies and our minds. And it really, really does impact our brain chemistry, which I can chat a bit about. So now, let's go to the category of sugar users and abusers, because those are typically the emotional eaters. Now, emotional eaters truly, more or less, can take or leave sugar. they like it. Don't get me wrong. It's a comfort food. There's a slight lift in their brain chemistry. It's a pleasure on the tongue. It can still be a go-to food when they're stressed. But emotional eaters are less responsive to, it's less intense and less quick to impact their brain chemistry. So they'll reach for it. But in a pinch, if they need to eat because they're distressed, they've got an emotional, they've got an emotion that they don't have the time or the skills to process in that moment.
Yeah.
They will reach for food, and they could overeat chicken and broccoli and salads. And in fact, a lot of my sugar clients, after I get them unhooked from sugar, I teach them how, it's a 3-step process. I teach them how to identify the voice of the sugar dragon in their head, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I do hear it. Great. Mm-hmm. I want you to observe it. And I teach them how to, that's not me. It wants sugar and I don't. So you create this sort of like capacity to move into metamind and observe this rogue animal pleasure drive that is not me. It's not, and we're not our bodies, we're not our minds. We have a body and we have a mind. Yes. And it's our animal body that's addicted to sugar.
Yes.
And it's a teeny tiny rogue pleasure drive that comes out of the limbic brain, and I call it the dragon, and we are not the dragon. The dragon has its own agenda, as you know, which is why it's unrelenting when it locks in its eyes on a donut at the staff party, right? Why it's obsessed with it, and it just keeps bugging us till we give in.
Right.
Because it's not us. It has its own agenda. So the step number 2 is to observe it, and step number 3 is to ignore it. And I walk people how to do it. It's actually relatively easy. Okay.
Wow.
So, but with emotional eaters, the dragon isn't, it isn't the dragon. I call it Dracula. So sugar addicts have dragon, and emotional eaters have Dracula. Now, Dracula, for sugar addicts, they can break up a sugar and become a whole food woman or a whole food man, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But they might still have Dracula. Now, Dracula takes over where the dragon leaves off. Now, Dracula will still say, it'll still talk us into eating when we're not hungry. We'll snack when we're not even hungry. We'll overeat a meal that tastes really good, even if it's whole foods. A lot of my sugar addicts will move from sugar to overeating cashews or peanut. They'll go through half a jar of peanut butter.
That's me.
Oh yeah, peanuts are crack cocaine. I know.
Well, mine is macadamia nuts.
Macadamia nuts, yes. Very, very common. So for many of us, we have to kind of put a food rule around it, put it on the yellow list, and be really, and not just be clever with it. Really go inside and ask yourself, what feels like a reasonable amount of macadamia nuts to have in my diet? And then you do the what, when, where, why. So what kind of macadamia nuts? Maybe raw would be great. As soon as you toast them and roast them and put salt on them, that, get even more addictive.
Interesting.
The when, well, I'll have it only with a meal. Or, I'm not going to snack on them, but I'll have them with a meal. And how much? Maybe, like a palmful or 7 or 8 or whatever feels your truth. Mm-hmm. And then you set your food rule, because food rules don't stick unless it's your truth. Okay. And if you're being clever, they don't really work. It's like you just go in and you figure out, what do I truly want to do here? What feels right for me? And then you just are really clear about the rule. And then if there's any issues, you can just give your dragon well, it's Dracula really, because Dracula is the one that will use whole foods to
soothe emotions.
Soothe emotions, to pursue pleasure.
Yeah. Okay.
So with emotional eating, we learned somewhere along the line, likely in childhood, maybe in our teenage years, that food was a great comfort. It soothes us. Mm-hmm. When we're kids, our nervous systems are not fully developed yet. Mm-hmm. So when something bad happens, that's really difficult to process. We need an adult with us to help us process those emotions. And most emotional eaters had inadequate and inconsistent nurturing.
Yes.
And that's the vast majority of us, truthfully. It's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult to be perfectly consistent and perfectly adequate in our modern culture. I've been a mom. I know I did not adequately or consistently nurture my own daughter, despite, of course, all of our best intentions as parents. And of course, there's some emotional eaters that come from horrific backgrounds of abuse and neglect. So we've kind of fallen on a continuum that way, but almost all emotional eaters will look back and say it's true. I had inconsistent, where sometimes your parent was there and they were there to validate you and hear you and help you feel and process emotion and move it through the body, but not always. And so you just you're never really sure if there was someone you could run to for a hug and for comfort. Sometimes you could, sometimes you couldn't. Or sometimes you would run to somebody for that comfort. So Susie said this to me at school today, and you're really upset. And the parent goes, oh gosh, well, goodness gracious, what are you crying about? Like, that's ridiculous, right? There was no validation. There was, right? So these feelings get locked in the body. So then we start looking, our animal body starts looking for places for assistance with bringing the nervous system down to soothe ourselves. Food is a wonderful option. It's readily available and it does a really good job, really, really good job. If you've ever tried to cry and chew at the same time, it's almost impossible.
Good work, yeah.
It's almost impossible, right? So I've watched myself do all these things. So basically, the job of our caregivers in childhood is two things. One, to validate and soothe and help us process emotions so they can clear the body, they can be healed. And number two is to help us intellectually understand that what happened, I wouldn't say it's not quite, I want to say it wasn't personal, but it might have been, but just to help us not tell a story or create a limiting belief, a core belief about why it happened.
Okay.
So for example, let's say I run to my mom, it's grade 1, and Susie said something terrible. It told me that, I was 4 eyes because I wore glasses back then. You're 4 eyes. And I was teased about wearing glasses. And I'm really, really, really upset. And I come home and I tell my mom about this. Now, if she's on the job, she'll say, if she's available, she has the bandwidth and the time and the skills, she will say to me, sweetheart, Susie said that? Yeah, she did. Oh, she called you a 4-eye, right? And she'll keep asking me allowing me to just keep telling the story till I discharge, the tears come out. And then she'll see that I'm starting to get calmer and she'll say, oh, darling. Like she just, that would be really hurtful. And she'll say something like, sometimes when people tease you, they're actually really jealous because your glasses are pretty cute on you. I'll tell you, I think you look like you're super smart.
Yeah.
Right? She's reframed what happened. I'm ugly and I'm different into I'm special and I'm smart.
Yes.
Right? And so I could have gone through my life with the core belief, I'm ugly or I'm different or whatever. But my mom helped me reframe it so that it doesn't create a limiting or a negative self-belief.
Yes.
So that's the job of our caregivers. Hell of a tall order. What's that?
That doesn't happen.
No, it's a tall order. Sometimes we get it right as parents, but we're not always there to do it. But what happens if parents, and most parents probably do a pretty decent job of it, but not perfectly. So most parents will do this for children. In an ideal world, they'll do that for children. And roughly in our late teens, as our neocortex starts to develop so that we can do that reframing of painful experiences ourselves so that it doesn't create a limiting self-belief. And we know we picked up tools on how our mothers and our fathers and our caregivers soothe us. We start to take that role over. That was always how it was supposed to be. They show us how they do it for us. They show us how to do it. And then we begin to take over in our late teens and by our early 20s, we have our strong nurturing self already developed. And our nurturing self can work with our feeling self and with our thinking self to do a 4-step process. So this is kind of the 4-step process I teach to move through emotional eating.
Okay.
when you're about to eat something, you're not hungry. It's not food you really want to be eating. You know, there's emotional eating going on. You stop, you drop, you find someplace quiet, you do this 4-step process. Step number 1.
Okay.
You say to yourself, the nurturing self, which is what should have been developed throughout childhood, and you kind of take over where your parents left off. And if you don't have a nurturing self, this is where it's great to work with a coach, because they can play your nurturing self. They'll reparent you so that until you've got that internalized and you're like, I can do this for myself now. I got it. And it doesn't take long to learn as an adult, actually. So your nurturing self steps in and says, sweetheart, we don't really need that chocolate cake. We're full. We're good.
Okay.
So what's going on? What are you feeling, sweetheart? And then, your feeling self will say, I'm actually blah, 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 blah. And you're like, great. That makes sense. Is there anything more? Is there anything more you need to tell me? And the feeling self will keep talking, perhaps. Well, yeah. And also, you know what? You didn't stand up for yourself at the staff meeting yesterday when Bob said blah, blah, blah. That wasn't even your fault when that thing didn't work. Yeah. And the nurturing self's job is to hear and to validate. That's it. You don't comment. You don't problem solve. You just nurture, you validate, and you listen.
Perfect.
Is there anything more, sweetheart, you need to tell me? And in the early days, there'll be a lot. There's a lot of things we haven't been listening to. We've been drowning out through food. So you do that till you feel like you've kind of exhausted, you've emptied it. And each one of those comments that your feeling self has shared with you are gifts. You've just been gifted with exquisite little insights, which help you to course correct, to figure out what you need to do to be in alignment with your body, with the feeling part of your body, right? So step number 3 is you then ask your feeling self, sweetheart, what do you need? What do you need? So now you move into the sort of, okay, we need to make some course corrections here. What are those course corrections? How can I get your needs met? The feeling self might say, can you go tell Bob that, it wasn't really your fault and you didn't appreciate being called out in that meeting? Yeah, I can do that. Right? Or something, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I need you to get a new job. I need you to leave your marriage. I need you to go and get a assertiveness training. So blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, those insights are freaking gold. And when we're emotional eaters and when we're sugar addicts, we have cut ourselves off for that information because we likely didn't know how to do that process of feeling those feelings, validating, receiving, and then figuring out what do I need to do to get those needs met underlying those feelings and to clear them out of the body. We are chock full of unexpressed, unvalidated, unprocessed feelings. And sooner or later, they'll make us sick, right? And they drive the compulsive overeating. The 4th step is to go figure out, okay, how am I going to get this need met? It's your job now as the adult self to figure out if this was your child saying, Mom, I need this, you would darn well go and find a way to get it met, right? That's your job now. And that loop is so powerful. And over time, your feeling self, feels nurtured, feels like it can trust you, knows that it's incredibly important insights are validated, that it's important. So the feeling self gets excited because it's like, oh, I can hardly wait to tell you about blah, 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 blah. So many of us that are overeaters, emotional eaters and sugar addicts have lives that don't really work. And over time, we wind up in a lot of pain. Part of it because the pain's really backed up. And part of it is because it's incredibly painful to abandon ourselves chronically.
Yeah.
So with emotional eating, what we need to do is develop the inner nurture, learn that 4-step process. There's more we need to do, but that's kind of like the foundational.
Foundation, yeah.
And then we need to learn how to tune in to self, to feel our feelings, to validate them, process them, and learn from them and grow from them and honor them and act on them where appropriate. So that we're not, so we stop self-abandoning through emotional eating. And instead we developed inner nurturing. So, I mean, that's a real sort of high level.
Would you consider emotional eating as sort of self-abandoning then?
It is self-abandonment.
Yeah. Okay. That puts a whole new spin on that. That's really good. Yeah.
And it's not for any other reason that we didn't learn how to we don't have a developed inner nurture.
Yeah, we don't.
We just don't. Yeah. It's a skill. It's totally learnable.
That's what I'm saying. Like, these are the skills we're trying to get people to understand. Like, if you want to lose weight and keep it off, there are these skills you have to learn. So, yeah. Awesome. I've got a whole bunch of questions here. Can I start asking you some questions from our audience?
Sure.
They are just dying here to know. Okay, so Margie says, I love sweets so much. I just can't imagine living the rest of my life without any of that, especially at a party or a cruise or a vacation. Help me. What would you say to Margie?
Can she come on the line or?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure how live it would be. So Margie, here's the thing is that I never, ever talk anybody into or out of anything. It's all about what is your truth. So for you, if you were my client, I would say, go sit quiet someplace and ask yourself, am I a sugar addict? Go through the quiz, and maybe I can send it to Angela and you guys can have it.
Yeah.
And if you are an addict, ask yourself if you're of two minds. Now, all addicts, true addicts, are of two minds. There's a part of them that really, truly knows, like deep in their bones, and really, truly wants to stop eating sugar or to significantly cut back. And there's a part of them, the sugar dragon, that never wants to do that. Life isn't worth living without it. That's stupid. It goes into panic. It starts pestering you and freaking out. It throws temper tantrums.
Yes.
So the dragon never, ever, ever, ever wants you to break up with sugar because it's a junkie. The dragon doesn't care about you. The dragon is that rogue pleasure drive that forces cigarette smokers who have mouth cancer from smoking to smoke a cigarette through a hole in their throat. Yeah. I've seen them standing outside of hospitals, smoking a cigarette through their throat, holding on to an IV bag. Rationally, they know what they're doing is insane. Mm-hmm. But the dragon will just keep pulling and pulling for the nicotine. That's what the dragon does. And it will keep pulling for sugar, even if we have cancer and blinding migraines and depression, obesity, cataracts, anxiety, heart disease, high blood pressure. Those are all linked to the consumption of sugar. The dragon doesn't care. It cares only about getting high, having a party with sugar. But you, the true self, which is the observer self, might actually care. So you need to go in and ask yourself, are you of two minds? If you're not an addict yet. You're just exercising your constitutional right to enjoy sugar, into which case I would say, love it. Every mouthful of it. Be mindful. Every mouthful, enjoy. Let the speedball of a Black Forest cake delight the hell out of you, bring you pleasure. And even if rationally it's harming your body, you're not an addict yet. Addicts are born in that moment when the higher consciousness breaks away from this pleasure drive and begins to observe it and go, I don't want to be doing this anymore. And you become of two minds. All addicts are ambivalent. That's why my technique works, because I teach you how to separate those two and to observe and ignore the dragon. And yeah, so for you, wait for that moment till you're of two minds. And then there's lots of right ways to kick sugar, and you're welcome to reach out to me. I can help you walk through that 3-step process, but you got to be ready. Yeah. And it's what every addict knows is hitting bottom. You need to be ready. There'll be a moment where you go, I'm ready. I know this is killing me. Now there's 3 levels of knowing in terms of, there's clients that come to me who say, Florence, I feel like I should get off sugar. Yeah, I'm really passionate about it. I saw the study and all the friends in my yoga studio are doing this. And oh yeah, I'm really excited. I want to give up sugar. To which I'll say to them, you're not ready for me yet. I could feel all the buzz and the sparkle and the passion. I'm like, you're not ready yet. But what I would suggest you do is start with the 28-day sugar-free challenge. Just get rid of it for 28 days and then see where you're at. Because it's not deep enough yet. Some will say, Florence, I think I should give up sugar. I've read some studies. I've seen the science. Yeah, I think I should give up sugar. And I'll say to them, you're not ready for me yet. But you could probably start with the 28-day challenge or sugar-free cleanse, or give it 2 weeks or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third person will come to me to say, at 2:00 in the morning, I know in my bones, I'm literally scared. There's this stone cold, chilling knowing I need to get unhooked from this stuff, and I need to do it now. And I'll say, okay, you're ready. Let's do this. Hopefully that's helpful.
That is so good. Okay, here is another really good question. Do you have to exclude all sugar, including from whole foods like fruit?
I'm going
to say this. I do have patients who struggle with fruit.
Yeah, I never, ever, ever recommend treating whole foods in the same way as we would refined carbohydrates. It doesn't mean it agrees with your body. For some people, the sweetness of a banana or a mango or a pineapple, those really strong sugar flavors in the early days of sugar addiction recovery or emotional eating recovery, just makes it more difficult to feel peaceful and satisfied with your meals. So just put it on the yellow list for now and say, just put it on the yellow list and say, maybe once in a blue moon, or maybe once I've lost my weight, I'll see how I can do with bananas and oranges or things that are really sweet. But don't say I'll never again eat fruit. Just say for now, I've noticed that it seems to trigger that overeating, that desire for more sweets, brings me back to the right refined stuff. So I'm just going to put it on my yellow list for now.
Okay, that sounds great. What about, this is another question from Margie. She said, as a sugar addict, do I give up all wine, Baileys, and mixed drinks? What about straight vodka or other booze? So what about alcohol and sugar?
Right. So alcohol is sugar. Absolutely. It's a carbohydrate. It's a saccharide. It's fermented. Absolutely. I mean, and some sugar addicts can do wine once in a blue moon. They can do a gin and tonic, not tonic. Tonic's got sugar in it, but some people do like a homemade mix with it. Some people are once in a blue moon will have some alcohol, but they have to be really, truly mindful. Yeah. Is this triggering sugar cravings the next day or 2 days later? They'll have a drink and think they've done just fine. And then 2 days later, they're craving bread. And they'll be like, oh, this is kind of weird. And I'll go, oh, right. Or in the moment, they've had a couple of drinks, they're out, and all of a sudden, they're in the bread basket. Like they lose all impulse control, right?
Yes.
Which is, yeah. So for many, many people, if you really, truly want freedom, you really, truly want to reverse any kind of lifestyle disease, including getting to your goal weight, alcohol is a great thing to just say, well, I'll play with that later. But for now, I'm just going to be a whole food man or a whole food woman. I'm going to leave all of these other pleasures aside for now till I get where I want to go. And then I'll bring them back in and see how I do.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Florence, we are 4 minutes over time. Okay. I so appreciate you. This has just been so enlightening. I have loved every minute of this. And I think there are lots and lots of comments in the chat about what people are getting out of all of this. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And you have a free gift for our audience. Is that correct? I'm going to look here and see. Carb sugar cravings using EFT. There's a free script and a demo video. So Kyle, would you please put that in the chat so that people can download that? And we are also going to send an email out. So that way you can stay in touch with Florence if you would like to do that and get off sugar. That is so awesome. Thank you so much, Florence.
You're so welcome. And with that gift comes a free 15-minute coaching call if anyone has questions or wants to connect.
Oh, that is great. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
And this concludes my interview with Florence Christophers. Isn't she amazing? Again, if you'd like to learn more and sign up for a complimentary 30-minute session with Florence, just head over to JourneyBeyondWeightLoss.com, click the podcast link, and find episode number 65. And we'll put a link to her schedule in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
Hey, Hey, if you really want to lose weight and keep it off for good, your next step is to sign up for Dr. Angela's free weight loss course, where you're going to learn everything you need to get started on your weight loss journey the right way. Just head over to journeybeyondweightloss.com/free course to sign up. Also, it would be awesome if you could take a few moments and write a review on iTunes. Thanks, and we'll see you in Journey Beyond Weight Loss.